Hello. Thank you for joining me for another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I'm so glad you're here. And so the name of today's talk is Love is an Everyday Event. And the song is by Pentatonix. It's called Seasons of Love. If you'd like to listen to the song before you hear the talk, just go ahead and click on the link. It will be down below. So we're going to be talking about the fact that love is an action. It is not just words. It has to be backed up by real action. We'll be talking about how to increase your love in your relationships. We will have that. We will have Life is for Loving from Eric Butterworth. We will also be looking at the lives of the Franciscan Friars. You know how much I love them and how they dedicate their lives every single day to being of service and to helping others and to show love in action. So we will be talking about that. We will be talking a little bit about Saint Theresa of Liseaux, just because I find her so phenomenally inspiring. We will be talking about her as well. We'll be talking about going from learning how to love on a daily basis through practicing certain skills to learning how to love spiritually. So before I go any further, let me just pull some of the lyrics from the song by Pentatonix. Again, you can listen to it yourselves, but some of the lyrics are 5,225 600 minutes, 525,600 moments so dear. How do you measure a year? How about love? Measure in love. Seasons of love. How do you measure in truth that she learned, or in the times that he cried? In bridges he's burned, or the way that she died? It's time now to sing out. Though the story never ends, let's celebrate a year in the life. Remember the love. So we're talking about when you look back on your life, if you ask yourself the moments that you remember the most, they are moments that were filled with love. Either that you were giving love to someone, or someone showed incredible amounts of love to you. When you loved, when someone loved you, the actions and expressions of people's love to you are what sticks in your mind. So if you look back over all of the dozens of years of your life, remember the happy times were all based on love that was given to you and love that you were expressing. So we're going to be talking about experiencing love more. And so we're going to start off with this article called How to Increase Love in Your Relationships. And so it was written by someone named Jonathan Lindquist. He is a Swedish gentleman. He was an international adventurer and mountaineer. He did expeditions around the world. He is now a speaker and a coach, and he talks about the fact that he needed to make a very drastic change in the way that he related to people. He went through a very rough patch with his relationship. And so he says, Amanda and I 1 year ago started a project to scientifically increase the love back into our relationship. It is an experiment that changed my life and that changed our relationship. So he says, remember back to when he was falling in love, and you look back on your life and remember what that felt like. He said, it felt like every time I looked at her, my heart was melting. He said, I was the kind of guy that would be away for her for like 20 minutes and send her a text saying, I miss you. And I was the guy who would show up at her office with flowers. I was the guy who would sing to her with a guitar, and he said he couldn't play guitar. He was that guy that was just romantically expressive and showing her how much he loved her. But he says after 7 years, that all changed. And he started sending her texts that said, make sure you bring the chips to the movie and don't be late. And so he realized that something was drastically wrong, because she called him up one day and she was crying. And she said, we've come to the make it or breaking point. She said, Amanda said, I don't think our relationship will work. And he said, I felt ashamed. How did this happen? She was the love of my life. She was the most important person in my life. He said, I'd been living a success-driven life, chasing fame and glory. I'd been doing expeditions all around the world. I lost the sense of feeling certain emotions towards myself and towards others. I could feel the emotions of stress, anger, and frustration. The emotions of love and gratitude and empathy were very hard for me to feel. Those emotions were what were needed to make the relationship work, and I was not able to feel those emotions. So he went to his coach, to his mentor, and he explained the whole thing, and he said, Amanda has come to me and said, I don't think our relationship is working, and this is really, really important to me, and what do I do? And he said, my mentor just laughed at me and smiled, and he said he held up this glass, and he added some water, and he put in there 10 straws. He said, the glass is your brain. It is the water, is the liquid, is your emotions. So these straws are the receptors. The water is the emotions that you have of frustration, stress, and anger. Those emotions that are easy for you to feel are the ones that are connected to those 9 straws. The 9 straws are the receptors that you have an easy time conveying those feelings. He said, but there's one straw, and that's for gratitude and love and empathy, those feelings that are harder to feel. And he said that one straw may even be blocked. This straw is called the oxytocin receptor. It increases the feeling of love, gratitude, and empathy. To feel more of these, he said, you can make a change, but it's like any other muscle. If you want to work out any muscle, you have to go to the gym and you have to work on it pretty much daily for a relatively long period of time. And then you can get that muscle to improve. He said, it's the same way with your brain. You can create new pathways in your brain by creating new receptors. So they decided to do this. So he went back to Amanda and he told Amanda all this, and Amanda and he made a commitment to go ahead and do some research and do the work to improve the oxytocin receptors in their brains. They were able to grow new oxytocin receptors, and then he was able to feel again. And he said when he was able to apply all that, he was able to know what love was. So he went back, they did a lot of research under oxytocin improvement techniques, creating techniques. Every single day they Googled about it, and they found about 20. So he's going to share 3, which I will talk about right now, and then I'll give you a couple of other ones that when I went to do some research, I found some other ones that we will be able to relate to very, very easily. So the 3 ones, the first one is, he said it will change the atmosphere incredibly quickly. The very first one is hugging. So you not only just got to hug someone, you got to hug them, and you got to hold it and hold it and hold it for a couple of seconds. The hugging and the touching increases the oxytocin production in your brain, and it's very, very powerful. The second one is, and this is not going to be news to any one of us, that every single day he does a gratitude meditation. Professor Robert Amen says gratitude blocks the toxic emotions of envy, depression, and anger, which destroy happiness. You need to focus on memories of gratitude. So he said, if you can focus on some memories that you had from your childhood, that would be good, because memories from childhood are often more powerful. When we were children, we felt emotions much more strongly. As we get older, we turn the volume down on all those. He says, if you can look for moments of gratitude in the relationship where you are now, that will improve the relationship as well. So he tried to remember times that he had with Amanda that he was grateful for, but he also tried to think of times in the future that he wanted to come that he could be grateful for. So he remembered that he spent 4 months in Africa working with children, and they ate the same food every single day. They had only one football to play with. Many of them had to share the same bed. But he said these were the most grateful children that I ever met in my whole life. He said, if they could be grateful, then I could find a way when I'm sitting in my meditation to be grateful as well. So the third fastest way to get more oxytocin receptors going is communication, and he gives you 3 different ways to improve your communication. The first is he understood that there was a huge lack of communication that was going on in his relationship by the time Amanda and he came to this breaking point. So the first thing that you can do is eye contact. Very deep, strong, long-lasting eye contact triggers the oxytocin production in your brain. The second is dare to share your emotions. He says go personal. He spent time in the military, and he was taught in the military not to feel his emotions, to be a man and to be very strong and to not to cry. He says try to really share your emotions, and that will make a huge difference, and that will create trust. And when you create trust, that creates more oxytocin. The mentor said that I was in my head too much, and I was disconnected from my emotions. I had to go from my head to my heart. We talk about that all the time, and that's through communication. And the third way to improve communication is to talk about your relationship fears. So he said when they had the rough patch where she said that he didn't think they were going to make it, he realized that there were certain areas in his relationship that he just didn't talk about. Certain subjects I didn't have the courage to talk about, like children, the economy, future, and a house. He said, I was a mountaineer climbing mountains all around the world, but I didn't have the courage to talk about children because it scared me. But we sat down. He said, I collected all my courage and we had a talk. And he said it was such a relief to be so honest and to be able to say what was really on his mind. He said, we bonded so much and so strongly. So he said, the secret to creating a more emotionally healthy relationship is to work on your oxytocin receptors. And so those are 3 techniques that he gave us. The other ones that I picked out that I knew that we could relate to are yoga. So, some people do yoga and that increases your oxytocin. And music, we talk all the time about how listening to music affects you, as well as massage, because that's touch, and spending time with friends. Spending time with friends will increase your oxytocin as well. So he says, I challenge you to start your own oxytocin project. So he says, do you want to see how oxytocin feels? So he says, and the crowd said, yes, yes. Again, this was during a TED Talk. And so he said, let's bring Amanda up on the stage. So he brought Amanda up on the stage and he looked into her eyes real deeply and he said, I want to thank you for these 10 years that we've had together. I want to thank you for being such a wonderful partner and for loving me so much and going through this project. And damned if somebody didn't come out from behind and give him a little box. And yes, he went on his knees and pulled out a ring and he proposed to her. And it was amazing. And it was just, I felt my heart stirred just by watching this event. She started to cry and everything. So he says that's oxytocin. I mean, that's how you see what it feels like to have these incredible emotions. So I want to move on to the Franciscan Friars. Those were some real practical techniques that you can use to increase your ability to show love in your life. But I wanted to move on to the more of the spiritual part of it. So you know that I really, really love the Franciscan Friars. And so I've been studying them for years now. And I came up with one of their talks, which is about showing love daily. So the Franciscan Friars were around in the 12th century. St. Francis had his conversion experience at age 25. He was passionate about living the gospel, not just speaking the gospel, but living the gospel. Over 10,000 people now are involved in this Franciscan movement, not only just people who are religious and consecrate their whole life, but lay people also make a commitment to show their lives and make them dedicated to St. Francis. So there are many ways that he stays connected so that he has the ability to show life on a daily basis, and one of them is by praying. He does 4 to 5 hours a day of praying. He says this improves your relationship with God. Jesus gave us the example by feeding people, healing the wounded, and working with the poor. So St. Francis actually had a really big fear of leprosy, and he had to get over that and to pray on it and to ask God to give him the ability. And as you know, he eventually went out and worked with lepers quite a bit. He did hands-on work with the poor. So he said another way to increase your ability to show more love is to for them to go preaching, but it doesn't have to be giving a formal talk. It could be just working one-on-one with someone, sharing your faith, and being committed to apostolic life. He said he lives with a crew of people that all share this passion. They live together as brothers, a fraternal event. So he says he lives his life focused on wanting to be like Jesus, consecrated his whole life. They never have enough money. They ask permission for everything they do. And the reason they ask permission is because they want to make sure that they're not having a negative effect on anybody else in their lives. So they ask permission to make sure this isn't going to harm anybody else. And it's about your relationship with God. And he said if you want to be able to show more love, you have to be sure that your relationship with God is really good. And he talked about the fact that sometimes there are these unplanned interruptions where the Holy Spirit just shows up in his life. He says he gets in there to use me to speak God's words and to communicate God's heart and God's love. Love is an ability. We come from love. We are made to love. The goal is to be a gift of love with your whole life, something you are made for. It is an ability. It is a skill. You need to know how to love. You need to have a willingness and a choosing the good of the others over you. Live together in poverty. They take to the streets quite often to deal with drug addiction. He said drug addiction is like the modern day form of leprosy. To bring hope and to offer counseling. They also visit schools. They do personal visits to drug addicts that are already in recovery. There was one particular event where he showed the blessing of this new apartment where this couple in recovery had just moved into. He does work with quite a lot of homeless people and with prostitutes and drug addicts. He said our job is to enter into the lives of people, listen to the call of God in those people, and try to bring healing and reconciliation and try to encourage them. Franciscan love is comforting. Did you bring food, drink, clothing, accompaniment to those in need? constantly trying to help and make life more bearable. You can never ask a person too many times if there is some way that you could help them. So I want to move on a little bit to St. Teresa of Liseaux. So she is also known as the little flower of Jesus. She says, my way is that way that is filled with confidence and love. She was a Carmelite nun. She went in to the monastery when she was 15 years old. She died at 24 with tuberculosis. Pope Pius II said she was one of the greatest saints of modern time. Jesus said, love is like a coin. There are two sides. One side is the love of God, and second side is the love of your neighbor. So she writes this book. She talks a lot about how to show love to your neighbor. She says, when you are wondering how you are doing spiritually, ask yourself, how am I doing with my neighbor? If we love one another, God's love is brought to perfection in us. That's 1 John 4:12. So one of the reasons that she was able to be so successful showing love is that she made a commitment to see the good in people, to see their virtues and not their defects. She saw their shortcomings, but she didn't focus on them. The good she saw on them, this takes practice daily. She says it's like a drop of water hitting a stone, so you just keep doing it over and over and over and over, and it becomes more and more automatic for you to start seeing the good in people. Focusing on the flaws and the defects is a flaw itself, she says. There's nothing sweeter than to think well of our neighbor. She says it will also allow you to be more at peace. She was good at making excuses for others and not for herself. The things she saw in them that might be disagreeable, she always gave them the benefit of the doubt. She said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's in Luke 23:34. We will be judged in the manner we judge others, with mercy. She talks about mercy quite a bit. She talked a lot about not insisting on our own likes or dislikes, allowing people to be who they are and have their own beliefs. Finding faults in others, she said, can kill the spirit in them, and learning how to do this is showing love daily. She loved her neighbor by having a spirit of service towards them. She made herself available to help. She says it's not about making your own conditions of when to help. It's about being available for when they need you. She sought out those who were marginalized. She chose as her companions those who seemed sad or depressed, showing them love through compassion. She said she learned in her dying days, so about 2 weeks before she actually passed from tuberculosis, she was writing quite a bit, and she says she learned that you needed to have a personal love for others. Jesus said to love as I have loved you. She finally understood that loving your neighbor is about a personal acknowledgement, showing love through mercy, forgiveness, compassion, being willing to do something for them when they were in need. Since God loves us unconditionally and personally, she understood that that's how she was called to love. So charity is an art. How she talks about this, they use the word charity. You have to know how to love the individual person by showing them, not just by speaking. So let's move into Scripture. There are tons of acknowledgments in Scripture about how to show love. 1 John 4:16, and so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. 1 Peter 4:8, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. John 15:12, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. James 2:14-17, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? So suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself is not accompanied by action, is dead. 1 John 3:16, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. And Romans 13:8, let no doubt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. So metaphysically, love is the power that joins and binds us in divine harmony. It binds the universe and everything in it. Love is the idea behind service. Universal love is the whole of God's love, or divine love, while personal love is the expression that man gives to love according to his own understanding. In interpersonal relations, love is evidenced as devotion, interest, unselfishness, friendship, cooperation, goodwill, tenderness, affection, consideration, forgiveness, and service. So, in Youth Unity, there's a song that they sing every week that says, love is something, if you give it away, you'll end up having more. I just love that. We develop love in our heart by asking daily that the infinite love of the Father be poured out upon us by praying, meditating, and affirming that we are one with and express at all times the perfect love of God. So Life is for Loving. This is an article, was a book that was written by Eric Butterworth, and I took some of the quotes out of there that I thought would be helpful for us. He starts out by reminding us that I am love-full. I am full of love. God's Spirit is love. That's 1 John 4:8. Love is man's true nature. It is an inner power. It begins when spiritual source flows out through you. It goes on without end. The loving God and Spirit is in me, and I am in God and Spirit. We have been taught to think of love as a commodity rather than as a divine process. Love your neighbor means act lovingly toward him or her. Salute the divinity within others and celebrate love as the one true reality. That's Mark 12:31. Let love process move through us in our attitudes, our manners, and our actions. You are not really getting the message of truth unless you are loving, kind, thoughtful, tender, and accepting of other people as they are. Jeremiah 3:13 says, I have loved you with an everlasting love. We are always in love, always loved, always have enough love within us to deal with any and all relationships and experiences in the world. God's Spirit flows through us from the inner source that is inexhaustible. Let the loving activity flow through you, loving yourself, and thus radiating love for all. Love is not giving something, it is being something. It is beyond definition. Love is doing it, expressing it. Intuitively within ourselves we know love is not an object. Our need is not so much to be loved as to love, to be love. Hunger and thirst to express love and to radiate love. We've accepted the belief that God is love as if it is a commodity that God has, and so we can have it and pass it on along to others. Actually, it is more a description of what God is, more than what he does. I am the activity of God, expressing itself as me, therefore I am love, is also an activity. It needs to come into expression through action. The entire love potential of God is within you all the time. You can never have any more. You can never have any less. You are always loved from within. What you need is to give it by expression, by loving. So here's what I know. You can't just say you love. It's always an action. I thought of this the other day when I was getting ready to write this talk. What made me write the talk was that I was sound asleep and my little kitty got off the bed and was coughing and spit up, and I was like, you can't tell this cat you love this cat and kiss her and hug her every single day, and then when she's sick in the middle of the night, just ignore her. So it turned out it was just a hairball. But the fact is I had to get up out of bed and comfort her and console her. Love is an action, always. Even when it's inconvenient, it's still an action that you need to show all the time. You have all of these different expressions of it. I recently was in a situation, I was at one of my jobs, 5 of the 9 people were home with COVID. And I told one of my friends, and she instantly drove over with an at-home COVID test. And it was dark, and she doesn't like to drive in the dark. And so that's what love is. Love is showing. Love is getting in the car when you don't like getting in the car at night and driving over to someone's house and showing them love. So be aware that this is really an action thing, not just words. So for parents are the ones who show love the most frequently. And sometimes it's extremely hard. They have to make extremely difficult decisions that they know are not going to be received well. They have to go through a great deal of heartache to take actions, and it's very, very hard. I've recently watched some friends of mine who are parents, and they had to take an action, and it was just gut-wrenching for them. They knew it was extremely painful. They knew it was the extremely difficult choice to make. It was the right thing to do, but it was very, very hard to have to take this action towards their child. In the long run, it will have a very, very good benefit for the child, but going through it was extremely painful. And it just proves how sometimes you have to take actions that are not only difficult, but extremely emotionally painful when you know it is for the good of someone else. And that happens quite a lot with parents. Love is daily, in the bad times and the good, when it is convenient and when it is not convenient. Love is the expression of our best and highest self. Love is not a commodity to be given or taken. It is consistent, disciplined decision to show how much we value each other. Love is seeing the best in someone and encouraging them when they forget. Love is showing up for the people you love over and over and over, because real love doesn't end. Love is asking yourself what you can do to help somebody and asking them, what can I do to help you? Love is playing, laughing, talking, eating, and being together. Love is giving others your time. Love is an everyday event. And so it is. Remember, at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be. I'd love to hear your examples of when you were able to show love and when it really meant something to you. Sometimes you may have done something that was difficult for you to do, but you did it out of love, and it made everything better. So please share your experiences with me. I look forward to hearing from you, and I send you on your way with many blessings.